My name is Gina. Since retiring, my mornings have been quieter than I ever expected. Almost too quiet. I live in a small town in Oregon with a backyard that opens into a stretch of pine forest. Every morning at 5:30, I brew a pot of black tea and sit by the kitchen window, watching the sun rise over the shoulders of the old trees. I take my time with a slice of whole wheat toast, spread with strawberry jam I make myself. No one rushes me. No one calls out to me. The clock ticks softly in the background as if time itself has slowed down. It's been almost 2 years of mornings like this. Since retiring officially from the Children's Hospital, I packed all my scrubs away in a suitcase up in the attic. I live alone. No chaos, no noise, and at least that's what I tell myself, no loneliness. I thought this was how the rest of my days would unfold. Quiet, slow, and undisturbed. Until that phone call shattered everything. Came while I was pruning the roses out back. A number I didn't recognize from San Francisco. My daughter Claire had lived there for years. My first thought was that she'd gotten a new phone. Claire is my only child. My husband passed away when she was still in middle school. I worked night shifts and still made it to her science fairs, choir practices, tutoring sessions. I won't pretend I was a perfect mother, but I gave her everything I had. He made me proud. Earned a scholarship to UC Davis, majored in psychology. Found a job in San Francisco working as a youth behavioral counselor. Married Alan, her college sweetheart. They bought a house, had a daughter, Eileen, who just turned 2 this year. We didn't see each other often, but Claire made sure to video call me once a week. Sometimes she'd catch me mid-dishwashing, then lift Eileen up to the camera. The little one would be clutching her favorite rag doll, giggling like she knew exactly who I was. Claire would laugh and say, "She's picking up more words now." She even mimics dog barks. "Once you're here, she won't let you go." And before we hung up, I always said, "Don't overwork yourself. If you need help, just ask." She always replied, "Don't worry about me, Mom. I'm doing just fine." I believed her. The phone rang 3 times from the kitchen counter before I even noticed. Then it stopped and rang again immediately. I put down the shears, wiped my hands, and walked inside to answer. "Hello." It was a man on the other end. His voice was low and even, the kind of practiced calm that only made his hesitation more noticeable. "Hi. Is this Mrs. Gina Walker?" I paused. "This is she." He took a breath. "I'm calling from San Rafael Community Hospital. I'm the ER coordinator. I'm very sorry to inform you that at 10:38 p.m. last night, your daughter Claire was brought in following a car accident. Despite all attempts to resuscitate her, we were unable to save her." My mind went blank. He kept talking, but none of the words landed. I leaned against the fridge, feeling every drop of blood drain from my body. My ears rang, and though the afternoon sun still lit up the porch, it felt like I'd been swept into a silent snowstorm. "Is there someone with you?" he asked. I didn't know how to respond. I only remember nodding and finally saying, "I'll be there as soon as I can." After that, I started packing. Folding clothes into the suitcase. I wouldn't let myself stop, because stopping meant remembering her face. I still see it, our last video call. She had Eileen in her arms, her smile worn thin by exhaustion but still intact. "I'm fine, Mom. Alan's been swamped at work, so I'm a little tired with the baby. But really, don't worry. She always protected me from the hard stuff." And I let myself believe her. I never imagined that "I'm fine" would be the last thing she ever said to me. I'm not someone who cries easily. After all, I spent decades working in a hospital. I've seen more than my share of life and death. But that afternoon, as I sat on the floor folding clothes into my suitcase, I found myself stopping for a moment, wiping the corner of my eye with the back of my hand. It wasn't the kind of crying that rips through your chest. It was quieter than that, like someone had switched off a light in your head, leaving you standing in the dark, not sure where to go or what to do next. I left a note for my old neighbor Patty, asking her to keep an eye on the garden and bring in the mail. I tucked the spare key under the little flower pot by the front door. Before I walked out, I took one last look at the kitchen, the place where Claire used to practice piano, eat popcorn, make handmade cards. She turned 17 in that kitchen. We had an ice cream cake and she said, "Mom, I want to be like you someday. I want to live on my own terms and never depend on anyone." I remember smiling and telling her, "You will." Looking back now, I wonder, was she always trying to become the version of herself she thought I expected? And did I miss the moment she started slipping under the weight of it? On the flight from Portland to San Francisco, I didn't say a word. I leaned against the window, watching the gray-blue coastline unfold beneath the clouds. One question looped through my mind. In her final moment, did she call for me? Even just for a second, did she want me there? I didn't know what the next few days would bring. I just knew that somewhere in that city, there was a little girl not yet 2 years old who might be crying right now, with no one to hold her. And I had to go. The plane landed at 11:30 that night. San Francisco's air was colder and damper than I remembered. I pulled my coat tighter around my neck and wheeled my suitcase through the terminal exit. Under the streetlights, shadows stretched long across the pavement. Car headlights blinked past, each one carrying a story I'd never know. I hadn't asked Alan to pick me up. I figured he needed to stay home with Eileen. So I flagged a cab myself. By the time the taxi pulled into their neighborhood, the night had settled deep. It was a quiet middle-class area. Manicured lawns, clean driveways. A row of modest, well-kept homes. Claire and Alan had bought this 2-story house a few years back with a mortgage. I'd only been here once, right after they moved in. I remember how excited Claire was, giving me the tour, talking about knocking down the wall to make an open kitchen, and hanging a swing chair on the upstairs balcony so Eileen could sit and read. She gestured as she spoke, animated and bright, like a little girl drawing her future home with a fistful of crayons. When the cab stopped at the curb, I saw the porch light was on. I took a deep breath, grabbed my suitcase and knocked 3 times. A few seconds later, the door creaked open. Alan stood there, backlit by the hallway light, his face hidden in shadow. It had been a long time since I'd seen him. He used to be sharply dressed, always quick with a joke. But tonight he looked like someone I barely recognized. His face was unshaven, hair greasy, sweatshirt wrinkled, sneakers worn thin. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were unfocused. "You made it," he said, his voice scratchy like it hadn't been used in a while. "Yeah." A silence hung between us. He didn't move. Didn't offer to take my suitcase. So I carried it in myself, stepping through the doorway. A wave of smells hit me, beer, detergent and diapers. The lights inside were dim. A few delivery boxes were piled in the corner, baby clothes scattered across the couch, a toppled bottle on the floor. The TV was on, muted news anchors mouthing headlines to no one. I glanced around and asked, almost without thinking, "Where's Eileen?" He gestured vaguely upstairs. "Asleep." "Was she okay today?" He nodded. "Didn't eat much. Cried for a bit. Then just fell asleep." I nodded too. I didn't push further. The questions rising in my throat, I pressed them back down. This wasn't the time. "You should get some rest," he said. I set up the guest room. "Thanks," I replied quietly. He led the way upstairs and I followed with my suitcase. The guest room was cold. The sheets were wrinkled, the blanket looked like it had been pulled from storage at the last minute. I closed the door behind me, draped my coat over the chair and sat quietly on the edge of the bed, listening to the muffled sound of the newscaster's voice drifting up from downstairs. I barely slept that night. I woke up early the next morning. It was still dark outside, and the only sound in the house was me rummaging through the kitchen trying to find a pot. I wanted to make Eileen a warm breakfast. She was still little. Too much sugar wasn't good, and anything too hard was out of the question. I opened the fridge and found half a carton of milk and a few cans of beer. In the corner there was a bag of shriveled carrots and a sprouting potato. I searched through the cabinets for baby cereal but came up empty. I remembered Claire once telling me she liked to make oatmeal for Eileen with a little mashed banana. But there weren't any bananas in sight. From upstairs, I heard the faint sound of a child crying, then hurried footsteps followed by a door slamming shut. A few minutes later, Alan came down the stairs wearing the same hoodie from the night before. His hair was unbrushed, eyes red and puffy. "You're up," I said gently, trying to sound calm. He nodded, pulled the milk from the fridge and took a swig straight from the carton. "I was trying to find something Eileen could eat," I said. "Does she usually have milk around this time in the morning?" Alan furrowed his brow, thinking. "I'm not really sure. She hasn't been eating much lately. Has she lost any weight?" "I don't know." I paused, resisting the urge to push further. It was obvious he didn't want to talk about it. "The funeral's tomorrow afternoon," he said, switching the subject. "I spoke to the funeral home. They'll come by to pick up Claire's body." He glanced at me. "Do you want to come with me?" I nodded. Of course. Another silence settled between us. But it wasn't the kind of silence that asks for comfort or understanding. It was the kind that builds a wall, where both people know the conversation can't go anywhere. That afternoon I sat with Eileen in the backyard, letting her soak in the sun. She wore a slightly stained onesie, her tiny face buried against my chest as she drank from her bottle, eyes fluttering shut. I ran my fingers gently through her hair, fine soft strands of blonde that looked exactly like her mother's at that age. She was too quiet. Almost unnaturally so for a 2-year-old. A small, quiet alarm began to ring somewhere inside me. But I didn't let it grow loud. I told myself Alan had just lost the love of his life, and Eileen had just lost her mother. Of course the house felt like this. I told myself this wasn't the time to judge. I wasn't here to point fingers. I was here to say goodbye to my daughter. To be here for my granddaughter. So, part of me wondered if this was only the beginning. The sky on the day of the funeral was the color of a crumpled letter, gray, heavy, and full of things left unsaid. I wore a deep navy wool coat, the one I had originally planned to save for Eileen's second birthday party, still a few months away. Claire used to tease me for preparing things too early. But even she didn't know that in life, some things truly can't wait. The service was held in a modest little church. The crowd was small, mostly her co-workers and neighbors. Alan sat in the front row, expressionless, hands pressed against the seams of his pants, eyes fixed on the floor. Eileen wasn't there. I couldn't bear for her to witness any of it. I stood at the front and said a few words. I talked about the time Claire first learned to ride a bike, how she fell and got right back up. I told them how on her first day of work she walked out the door in an ill-fitting suit full of fire and determination. I didn't say she was a strong wife or a loving mother. I didn't know how to say any of that yet. I just said she was a really good person, a perfect precious daughter. When we got home I slipped off the coat and carefully hung it behind the door. I needed to do something, anything. Scrub a window, organize old boxes, fold laundry, whatever it took to keep my mind from returning to the image of that cold casket in the church. I opened the door to the small room Claire used as her office. The window was shut tight, sunlight filtering through the blinds in narrow, dusty stripes across the white desk where she used to sit. There was still a mug sitting there, the bottom ringed with dried coffee, like the ghost of a fingerprint. I started opening drawers hoping to find something: insurance papers, mortgage info, work records. The first drawer held pens and notebooks. The second was packed with magazines and Eileen's immunization cards. In the third I found it, a neatly printed stack of documents. On top was a cleanly formatted page, the title bold at the center. Preliminary divorce agreement. Claire's signature was at the bottom. Dated nearly 6 months ago. I froze. It felt like someone had hit me in the back of the head. I sat down and read the whole thing. She had listed every issue with unwavering clarity. Chronic alcohol abuse, financial irresponsibility, lack of parental involvement, emotional intimidation. Each item was coldly factual, devoid of emotion but piercing all the same. I couldn't believe it. The daughter who always said, "I'm fine," had been living in this storm without ever telling me. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes, and was swallowed by a quiet, aching regret. She had been drowning. And I never saw it. I carefully set the documents aside and reached for the black leather-bound journal beside them. The first page was blank. On the second she had written, "I want to live like Mom. Independent, strong, needing no one. I can do it." What followed were scattered entries, raw and jagged. "It's the 5th day Alan hasn't hugged Eileen even once. He says he's too tired, but I don't think he even knows when she last ate. I tried bringing up his drinking. He smashed a glass. I don't think it was anger. I think it's the shame of being sober long enough to see what he's become. I've started making a plan to leave. I have to. For me and for Eileen. She deserves a normal childhood." My hands began to tremble as I read. Her handwriting grew more frantic with each page, like a woman clawing her way through the edge of collapse, trying to leave behind some proof that she fought. One page had a stain where the ink had bled, like it had been soaked in tears. I touched it gently as if I could still feel her hand shaking on the paper. I don't know how long I sat there. I only know that eventually my tears fell too, landing right beneath the line that read, "Mom, I didn't tell you because I didn't want you to worry. I know how long you've held everything together alone. I just wanted to prove I could do the same. I couldn't read any further. I closed the journal softly and left the room. Eileen was sleeping in her crib, clutching a faded stuffed bunny, her tiny body curled up in fragile stillness. Her hair stuck to her forehead, and she made soft little humming sounds in her nose as she breathed. I sat beside her and cupped her tiny hand in mine. My Claire didn't get the chance to raise her daughter. And I didn't realize how far she'd fallen until it was too late. But I was still here. And I could still do something. I had to. I placed the stuffed bunny gently beside Eileen's hand, leaned in close and whispered, "Grandma's here now, sweetheart. I'm not going anywhere. And I won't let anyone hurt you." Outside, the wind pressed against the blinds, sighing like the house was exhaling after holding its breath for too long. But inside me I heard something different. A quiet voice. Clear, steady, resolute. The next morning when I walked into the kitchen to make coffee, Alan was already gone. He'd left a note on the dining table held down by a coffee mug. It said he was going out to meet some friends and wouldn't be back until later that night. There was no mention of Eileen. No arrangements made for her care. Upstairs I could still hear her softly humming in the crib. As I sliced a piece of bread, my thoughts kept circling back to the documents and the journal I'd read the night before. My mind was a tangled knot, looping over one line Claire had written again and again. I have to leave him for Eileen. She had made her decision. She was ready. She just never got the chance to carry it out. Standing at the sink, I stared through the window at the withered oak tree in the backyard. The sunlight on its peeling limbs had a strange, eerie stillness to it. And then it hit me, sitting in grief wouldn't change anything. If she was gone, then I, at the very least, had to finish what she never could. I found the folder Claire had carefully packed away. Inside was a business card she'd folded and tucked between some documents. Jennifer Reeves, family law attorney. The card's edges were worn, curling slightly. I dialed the number printed in black ink. It rang a few times before a woman's voice answered. Jennifer Reeves speaking. "Hi. I'm Claire Anderson's mother," I said, pausing as my heartbeat quickened. He passed away in a car accident a few days ago. I found your card among her things." There was a beat of silence on the other end. "Gina, is that right?" Jennifer's voice was softer than I'd expected. "I'm so sorry to hear that. I'd been working with your daughter for a little while." I sat down at Claire's desk, my fingers lightly tapping the wood surface. "She was really planning to go through with the divorce?" I asked. "I found the signed draft. It's dated nearly 6 months ago. She never told me any of this." "She didn't want you to worry," Jennifer said with a sigh. "We began drafting the agreement last fall. She was planning to file officially before Eileen turned 2. I closed my eyes. "So why didn't she?" "Alan refused to sign," Jennifer said quietly. "He was aggressive. Said some threatening things." Her tone slowed, each word chosen carefully. Claire recorded some of their conversations. She also saved written messages. Everything was encrypted and stored in her email. "I have backups on file." Outside the window, a squirrel leapt onto the fence. I suddenly felt a tightness in my chest. Did she ever mention what would happen to Eileen if something happened to her? She said the first person she'd trust was you. My throat closed up. "I'm still staying here at the house," I murmured. "Alan, he's not really looking after her. I'm not a legal expert. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. But I do know what Claire wanted." There was a pause on the line. Then Jennifer said carefully, "Have you considered applying for temporary guardianship?" I went still. "You wouldn't be starting a fight," she continued. "You'd be advocating for a stable environment for a child who just lost her mother. You're Claire's mother, Eileen's grandmother. And with her documented intent, you have a strong basis." I didn't respond. I just nodded as if she could somehow see the resolve forming in me through the phone. "Would you be willing to meet in person?" she asked. I glanced at the clock in the kitchen. It was a little past 10. "Yes," I said. "Let's have it today." We met at a small corner cafe. Jennifer was younger than I'd imagined, early 40s maybe. Tall and composed with dark brown hair pinned neatly at the back of her head. She wore a gray wool coat and rimless glasses. Her words were crisp, but her manner was gentle. She laid out the copies of the documents Claire had left behind, spreading them on the table for me to see. Claire's written statements, transcribed voice recordings, logs of Eileen's care, even snippets of Alan's drunken outbursts. It was all there, clear and damning. "She came to see me when she said she couldn't take it anymore," Jennifer said. "She told me if she didn't make it out, she wanted the law to carry forward the choices she never got to finish." I gripped the papers tightly, my knuckles turning white. Finally, Jennifer looked at me and asked, "Are you ready to follow through with this?" I thought of Eileen, how she'd murmured grandma before her nap today. Soft, sleepy, the word thick with milk and trust, like a quiet plea from someplace too small to understand everything but old enough to feel the shift. I looked up at Jennifer. "I'm not just going to follow through," I said. "I'm going all the way." A few days had passed. Alan left the house earlier than I did every morning and came home well after Eileen was asleep. He never said where he was going, just mumbled stuff to do before disappearing, then returned late, retreating straight to his room without a word. Meanwhile, I was learning Eileen's rhythms. She liked mashed bananas first thing in the morning, preferred her bath water just a little warmer than most toddlers, and couldn't fall asleep without hearing Goodnight Moon. Her world was small and delicate, every hug, every lullaby, a tiny thread stitching her to a sense of safety. But her father, her only remaining parent, seemed entirely uninterested in any of it. That evening I was making dinner in the kitchen. Eileen sat in her high chair, smearing steamed pumpkin across her cheeks and giggling as she waved a crumpled washcloth at me. I smiled and reached for a napkin to clean her up, when I heard the front door lock rattle. Alan was home. He walked in carrying the stale blend of cigarettes and beer. I'd never shown outright hostility toward him, but in that moment, I couldn't stop myself from frowning. He headed straight for the fridge, cracked open a beer and downed half of it in one go without saying a word. "Alan," I said, putting down the towel, "can we talk for a minute?" He froze, his eyes finally rising from the floor to meet mine. "About what?" "Eileen." He exhaled heavily like he was bracing for bad news. "What about her?" I kept my voice steady, soft. "I know these past few days have been hard. Claire's passing was sudden for all of us. But Eileen, she's still so young. She needs consistent care." He gave a short, bitter laugh and set the beer down with a thud. "You think I haven't been caring for her?" "I'm not accusing you," I said quickly. "I just think maybe we could work out a more regular care routine. We could take turns with her appointments, plan her meals. She's a little underweight right now and her nutrition needs attention." He raised an eyebrow at me. "You're a doctor, so of course you have opinions. But she's my daughter, not a patient." I took a slow breath. "Claire worked so hard to take care of her. I know there were issues between you two. But now that Claire's gone, I think we should." "What's that supposed to mean?" He cut in sharply, standing up. I paused for a beat, then said, "I just want us to work together. For Eileen. For Claire." His expression changed. He turned and walked into the living room, muttering under his breath, "You've been here 5 minutes and you think you can tell me how to be a father?" I followed. "Alan, that's not what I meant." He whipped around suddenly. "I know you never liked me. From day one you thought I wasn't good enough for Claire. Now she's gone and what? Now you think you can take over everything? Push me out." His words stunned me. "I'm just worried about Eileen. She's my daughter," he snapped. "You're her grandmother, not her guardian. Cooking a few meals and singing a couple lullabies doesn't make you her mother." He stopped mid-sentence. Because Eileen was crying. She'd gone stiff in her chair, tiny fingers clenched around the armrests, her little mouth trembling as tears welled up. I rushed over and picked her up, cradling her tightly, murmuring soothing sounds as she sobbed into my shoulder like a frightened kitten. Alan stood there for a few seconds. Then he turned, stormed up the stairs and slammed his bedroom door shut behind him. That night, after I rocked Eileen to sleep, I stood beside her crib for a long time. The room was silent. The soft yellow glow of the nightlight stretched across the walls. Her eyelashes cast faint shadows on her cheeks, her lips slightly parted as if she was whispering something in her dreams. I'd never come here to start a fight. All I wanted was to protect her. But now I was starting to understand. This wouldn't be resolved with kindness and cooperation alone. I took out my phone and saved a copy of the audio recording from our conversation, isolating the parts where Alan's voice had risen and the tension had peaked. I snapped photos of the beer cans by the fridge, logged the times he'd left and returned, and started a private folder. Not to attack him, but so that if this ever went to court I'd have the full story. A real story, not just about a daughter I lost, but about a granddaughter I had to fight to protect. I took Eileen to see a doctor. It was Jennifer's suggestion. She told me that if I was going to seek guardianship, I needed more than a grandmother's intuition. I needed tangible evidence that Eileen's care was lacking. The clinic was in a bright pediatric center downtown. The walls were covered in cartoon sea creatures, and the waiting area was lined with little blue whale chairs. Eileen stayed quiet at first, clutching her stuffed bunny. I tried coaxing a smile out of her, but she just looked at me and gently shook her head. When it was our turn, we met with Dr. Kaplan, a woman in her early 40s with a warm voice and a calm, gentle way of speaking that put children at ease without them even realizing it. The exam itself was uneventful. But when Dr. Kaplan reviewed Eileen's weight and dietary records, she paused. Her physical stats over the past 2 weeks show a slight drop in weight, she said. And her skin's a bit dry, likely from irregular nutrition. But what's more concerning is her emotional reactivity, which for a 2-year-old is a sign of stress. My stomach sank. You mentioned she's not sleeping well? I nodded. She wakes up easily at night and most days she refuses to eat. Dr. Kaplan made some notes, her expression turning more serious. I'd recommend running a blood panel and scheduling a psychological evaluation. She's showing early signs of separation anxiety, possibly even trauma response. Is it serious? She met my eyes. Her tone was calm but firm. If left unaddressed, it could affect her development, language, social behavior, even cognitive growth. My hands tightened in my lap. After leaving the clinic, I didn't go straight home. Instead, I stopped at a bench across from the local library. Eileen had fallen asleep in my arms, her lips parted slightly, cheeks flushed pink from the cold. I called Jennifer and told her everything Dr. Kaplan had said. We can submit the medical report as official evidence, she said. You can also file with the local Family Services Department to initiate a temporary guardianship investigation. I hesitated. Won't that feel too aggressive? You're not attacking Alan, Jennifer said gently but firmly. You're protecting a child. You're stepping in where her mother no longer can. You're doing the right thing, Gina. We filed the request. The caseworker arrived a few afternoons later. Thankfully, Alan wasn't home. Her name was Kathy Morris, a woman in her mid-50s with graying hair streaked silver, dressed in a brown trench coat and carrying a black file bag. She explained her role, then confirmed a few items on the application. She was patient with Eileen, pulling out a flashcard for her to name colors, then crouching on the floor to build blocks together. Eileen shrank back at first, but a few minutes in she gave a tiny smile and whispered, "Bunny's here," pointing to her toy. Kathy looked up at me and nodded. She trusts you. I didn't speak. I just nodded back. When she asked who had been Eileen's primary caregiver, I answered honestly. I have. She looked over the feeding chart pinned to the fridge, flipped through medical records and walked through Eileen's room, spotless and calm with a humidity gauge, an air purifier, a nightlight and labeled picture cards on the walls. You set all this up? I nodded. I'm a retired pediatrician. She noted it, her demeanor shifting, more focused now. As she was getting ready to leave, she said, I'll be contacting Alan as well and there will be a follow-up visit. Officially, we remain neutral. But some things. She looked around the room one last time. Are clearly visible. Alan came home that night while I was doing the dishes. The moment he walked in, he asked, What was that social worker doing here today? It's part of the community services investigation, I said, not turning from the sink. She was here to check on Eileen. You filed it. I dried my hands and turned to face him. I submitted the application for temporary guardianship. Not to go against you, but for Eileen. She needs someone who can give her full, consistent care. He let out a sharp laugh. So now you're not just replacing Claire. You're replacing me too? I froze for a second, but I didn't respond. He stormed upstairs, slamming the door behind him. A few minutes later, I heard the deadbolt slide into place, then the snap of a bottle being opened. That night, I added a few lines to the notebook I'd started for Eileen, a habit I'd borrowed from Claire's old journals. Today you stacked 3 blocks on your own and for the first time you said, grape juice. You're amazing, sweetheart. If your mom were here, she'd be so proud she'd leap out of her chair. Only after I finished did I realize I'd written your mom, not my daughter. Maybe that's the line. She's no longer here to be a mother. So now I have to be. That afternoon I took Eileen to picture book story time at the library. She sat on a green puzzle mat, listening intently as the librarian told a story about a little bear trying to find its way home. Most of the kids were there with their moms. Young, quick-moving, chatting softly in the corner, some checking their parenting apps. I was older, slower, out of place in every way but one. I knew Brown Bear by heart. Because over the past week I'd read it more than 100 times. When she smiled, 2 tiny dimples carved into her cheeks. And in that moment I suddenly understood why Claire had fought so hard. A child's laughter. That's a mother's final act of faith. We had just returned home when I saw Alan standing at the door. He was wearing a navy dress shirt I didn't recognize and had shaved. Beside him stood a woman I hadn't met, mid-40s, dyed light brown hair, gold-rimmed glasses. "This is my sister Denise," he said, his tone unusually calm. "She'll be helping me take care of Eileen." I nodded, expressionless. Denise smiled and extended her hand. "Gina, it's nice to meet you. Claire spoke about you." I shook her hand but didn't return the pleasantry. Alan went on, "I know you filed for temporary guardianship, but I'm also preparing my response. I'm Eileen's father. I'm not giving up on her." I stared at him, saying nothing. "I know I've been off lately," he continued, "but I'm working on myself. I have support. I have family. I have responsibilities. And I want the court to see that." I nodded slowly. "Then you'd better be ready to face what Claire left behind." His face tightened. "What do you mean?" "Her divorce petition. The voice recordings. The memos she kept with her attorney," I said quietly. "She was planning to leave you, Alan. She didn't get the chance. He thought about Eileen. She even thought about you. But you never looked back at her. Not once." He was silent for a moment. Then he let out a bitter smile. "You really think that's going to win you the case?" I pulled Eileen closer in my arms. "I'm not trying to win anything," I said. "I'm just walking the path my daughter didn't get to finish." A few days later, Jennifer called to let me know the court had officially accepted our case. The hearing was scheduled for 2 weeks out. She advised me to spend that time gathering and organizing every piece of documentation: doctor's assessments, the social worker's preliminary report, Claire's recorded materials, and detailed records of Eileen's daily care. Each night after Eileen fell asleep, I would quietly fill the white storage box I kept in the corner of her room. Her birth certificate, vaccination records, meal logs, reading notes, behavioral observations, doctor visits. Every page labeled, every detail accounted for. It wasn't about proving I was the perfect grandmother. It was about showing this system, this society, that I knew what I was doing. And more than that, that I was actually doing it. One evening, Jennifer called unexpectedly. "Alan submitted a care schedule," she said. "It outlines Eileen's routine, lists shared caregiving hours with his sister, even includes photos and a weekly activity log. Do you believe any of it? There are signs it's been staged. He wrote she drinks fully organic oat milk every morning, yet you've told me he can't even name her usual breakfast time." I let out a soft laugh. "He's putting on a show." "Yes," Jennifer said, pausing, "but if the performance is convincing, a judge might believe it. That's why we need to highlight the real emotional bond between you and Eileen, and the measurable improvements in her well-being under your care." I nodded. "I believe Eileen will say what she needs to say. Even if it's just a single sentence. Grandma hug." A week before the hearing, Kathy, the social worker, came by for an unannounced follow-up visit. She told me Alan had filed a complaint, accusing me of being emotionally unstable, controlling, and too old to care for a young child. I wasn't surprised. Kathy stepped into Eileen's room and looked around. The floor was scattered with picture books, building blocks, puzzles, and a scrapbook we'd made together with tiny handprint art. The scent of vanilla laundry detergent hung gently in the air, and the quiet hum of the air conditioner filled the silence. "How's she sleeping?" Kathy asked. "She can sleep 7 hours straight now." "Any fussing or tantrums?" "Very little. At bedtime she always asks for the Red Bunny story." Kathy looked at me then, her expression softening. "I've been observing the two of you. And?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I'm considering whether it's time this system actually heard what the child herself has to say." She closed her notebook gently and said almost to herself, "You may be more suited to care for Eileen than her own father." I stood there, silent, my throat tightening. That night I wrote in the journal, "Claire, I don't know if you can see any of this from where you are now. But I'm no longer just the grandmother who lives out of town. I am the only steady light left in this house. And I'll keep shining, until she learns to light her own." Eileen said it for the first time on a blustery afternoon. We were walking home from the library, her little hand tucked in mine, the wind tugging her knit hat sideways. I was juggling a tote full of picture books when she looked up, squinting into the breeze, and said, "Grandma, I don't want Daddy to yell." I froze. Kneeling down, I met her eyes. "He yelled at you?" She bit her lip and nodded, fingers pulling at the edge of her sleeve. I smoothed back her wind-blown hair. "Were you scared?" She nodded again and then wrapped her arms around my neck. And in that moment it wasn't shock I felt. It was confirmation. That quiet suspicion I'd carried for weeks, that Alan's parenting wasn't just inconsistent but harmful, had found its voice. Hers. The next morning I asked Jennifer to come by the house. I told her what Eileen had said. "Did you record it?" she asked. I shook my head. She said it on her own. I didn't even think to grab my phone. "That's okay," Jennifer said. "You can write a memo. Document everything, what she said, when, where, her emotional state, yours. The more detail, the better." I did exactly that. Jennifer helped organize our full dossier, which now included Dr. Kaplan's notes on malnutrition and anxiety symptoms, Kathy's 2 social work reports, Claire's signed divorce documents, voice transcripts, and her recorded intent to leave. My daily records of Eileen's care, routines, meals, language development. "We have enough for a formal case submission," Jennifer said. "But there's one more thing that can tip the scale." I looked up. "What is it?" "Witnesses." I didn't expect the first person to volunteer would be Mrs. Hawkins, the elderly woman who lived next door. She was the kind of woman you only meet in Southern California. Retired teacher, silver bob, back as straight as her opinions. She walked her dog past the house twice a week and always paused by the fence to say hello. That afternoon, I poured her a cup of red tea and asked if she'd consider writing a statement. She didn't even ask why. "It's about Eileen, isn't it?" she said. I nodded. She took a sip, set her cup down gently, and said, "Then I will." She wrote 2 full pages. Specific, dated, and heartbreaking. She recalled the night Alan came home drunk at 3 a.m., the afternoon Eileen cried in the backyard for 10 straight minutes with no one coming to check, the day she saw me holding Eileen on the porch, singing as she drifted off against my chest. My hands trembled as I read her words. Jennifer looked through the letter, nodded once, and said, "This will move the judge." A few days later, Kathy scheduled a non-formal interview. She sat alone with Eileen in her room, using something called an emotion doll kit. Each doll had a distinct expression and outfit, labeled with words like happy, angry, scared, missing someone. Kathy asked, "Who do these dolls remind you of?" Eileen picked up the missing someone doll. "Mommy," she said. Then she picked up the scared one. After a pause, she whispered, "Daddy." Kathy didn't press her. She just noted it all quietly. When she stepped out of the room, she met my gaze, and for the first time her eyes weren't just professional. They were human. Jennifer compiled everything into a thick folder and drafted a concise oral statement for court. Beyond the records I'd already kept, we now had medical testimony, social work observations, a neighbor's account, and, most important, Eileen's own fragile but unmistakable voice. "Are you ready to go to court?" she asked me. I looked down at the sealed letter Claire had written to Eileen, one I hadn't opened yet, but knew I'd carry with me into that courtroom. I nodded. "I'm not trying to win a case," I said quietly. "I'm trying to protect a child. And fulfill a promise her mother left in my hands." That night I took Eileen out to the backyard to look at the stars. I pointed to the sky. "Sweetheart, that light up there? That's from your mommy. She's always shining down. We just have to look up to find her." She wrapped her little arms around my neck and I closed my eyes, holding her closer. "And I'm always going to be here too," I whispered. "I'll be your home. Always." That morning, I woke up early on purpose and dropped Eileen off with Mrs. Hawkins next door. She clutched her favorite stuffed bunny and looked up at me with wide, innocent eyes. I knelt down, wrapping her in my arms. "Sweetheart," I whispered. "Grandma's just going to a meeting. I'll be back soon." She nodded vaguely, gave me a tiny smile and turned away. I watched her go, blinking hard against the sting in my eyes. Because I wasn't going to just any meeting. I was going to fight for her future. The courthouse was a weathered red brick building downtown. The metal detector at the entrance and the cold gray benches reminded me more of a hospital than a hall of justice. Jennifer was waiting outside, a thick stack of documents in her arms. She wore a black suit that made her look more like a general than an attorney. Sharp, focused, unwavering. "Today's only the preliminary hearing," she said in a low voice. "But this is where we plant the idea in the judge's mind, that you are the stable caregiver. Don't worry. Just speak from the heart. Tell her what you do for Eileen. And remind her of Claire's wishes." I nodded, but inside I felt like a bird trapped in a paper bag, wings fluttering, nowhere to go. Alan was already seated when I entered the courtroom. He wore a crisp navy suit, his hair combed to perfection, trying hard to play the part of the reformed father. His attorney, a composed man in his 30s, spoke with practiced ease, smooth, measured, completely in control. The judge was a woman in her early 60s. Her gray hair was cut short, her eyes steady but soft with fatigue. She looked like someone who'd heard 1,000 stories but still cared to listen to the next one. Jennifer opened with a clear, methodical presentation. Claire's signed divorce draft, her voice memos, the neighbor's testimony, the doctor's report, the social worker's notes. One item after another, placed calmly and precisely into the record. "Our petition is based on continuity of care, emotional stability, and the principle of familial placement," Jennifer concluded. "This isn't a battle. It's a continuation of what Claire had already begun." Alan's lawyer countered with the argument of biological paternal priority, emphasizing Alan's legal right to rebuild his relationship with his daughter and outlining the support network he now had, including his sister's active involvement. The judge listened closely, gave nothing away. Then it was my turn to speak. I stood, walked to the podium and gripped its edges with both hands. Jennifer gave me a small nod from her seat, her version of a reassuring smile. I cleared my throat. "My name is Gina Walker. I'm Claire Anderson's mother and I'm Eileen's grandmother. I know I'm not young. And I know by law, I'm not first in line to be her guardian. But I've been the one taking care of her these past few months. I make her breakfast every morning. I take her to story time at the library. I teach her how to put on her socks, how to paint, how to build puzzles. I know she likes her carrots soft with no salt. I know she cries when it's too dark unless there's a nightlight in the room." I paused. My eyes flicked over to Alan. His expression was calm, almost blank. He didn't look at me. I continued. "My daughter Claire. In the final year of her life, she was planning to leave that marriage. I found her journal. She had signed a divorce agreement. She wrote, 'I need to take Eileen and leave for her sake.' She didn't get to follow through on that. But she left me a recording, saying that if anything ever happened, the one person she trusted with her child was me." I steadied my breath. I'm not trying to take away anyone's rights. I'm not denying that Alan is her biological father. I'm simply telling you, under my care Eileen has been fed, seen, soothed, and protected. I cannot bear the thought of her being neglected again. I can't let her cry out in the night with no one coming to hold her. If you ask me why I'm here, why I'm doing this, the answer is simple. Because I made a promise to her mother. That I would protect her. For life. When I returned to my seat, Jennifer reached over and gently placed her hand on mine. The judge sat in silence for a moment, eyes closed, thinking. Then she spoke. "I will order continued observation by the social worker and a follow-up report before making a decision on temporary guardianship. Today's statements will remain on the record." The gavel struck with a muted thud. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clear. This was only the beginning. But I knew. He heard me. The sun was bright that morning, like it wanted to cast light on everything that needed to be seen. I sat on the bench outside the courtroom, hands clasped tightly in my lap. Jennifer stood beside me, quietly going over the key points of our submission one last time. But my mind had drifted somewhere else entirely. Eileen was still at the library. I had braided her hair that morning, 2 neat little plaits tied with yellow ribbons. She'd sat at the kitchen table sipping her milk and said, "Grandma, good luck." I smiled and nodded but didn't tell her I was going off to fight a battle. The courthouse as always felt colder than the world outside. I stood at our table, fingers numb. Alan sat across from me, unreadable. His attorney was polished as ever, but this time the confidence he carried at the first hearing had noticeably dimmed. The judge thumbed through the final packet of documents, then slowly removed her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. A pause settled over the courtroom like held breath. Then she looked up. "First," she began, "I want to thank both parties for their submissions and testimony." Her voice was measured, steady, but it carried weight. This is a case layered in emotion but rooted in reason. And the court's task is not to reward the most compelling argument, but to determine what arrangement best serves the child's well-being. I instinctively squeezed Jennifer's hand. In this case, the judge continued, the court considered the following. 1. The stability of the current caregiving environment. 2. Documented familial relationships and legal intent. 3. The child's emotional responses. And 4. Professional evaluations from medical and social work personnel. She paused again and turned toward our side of the courtroom. Taking all factors into account, this court hereby grants temporary primary custody of Eileen Anderson to Ms. Gina Walker. Mr. Alan Anderson is granted supervised visitation every other weekend and may petition for a custody review only after completing a minimum of 6 months of substance abuse treatment and parenting competency evaluation. I didn't react right away. It was Jennifer who leaned in and whispered, "We did it." As we walked out of the courthouse, I felt something inside me loosen, like a string that had been pulled taut for months had finally snapped. Not from wear, but from resolution. Sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting long shadows down the courthouse steps. I looked out at the city, the traffic, the people, the rush, and for the first time it didn't feel so unfamiliar. Jennifer stood beside me, looked over and said, "This isn't the end. But you've cleared the hardest gate." I nodded. "Claire can rest easy now." She didn't say anything, just placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. That night I opened Claire's letter. Jennifer had found it while organizing the case file. A letter Claire wrote on Eileen's first birthday. The envelope was labeled, "To my daughter, if I'm not there when you read this." I didn't read it aloud. I whispered it quietly to myself. Claire had written that she sometimes feared she wasn't enough as a mother. That she tried every day to make Eileen feel safe and loved. That if one day she was gone, she hoped someone would still be there. Someone who could shelter her the way I always meant to. I folded the letter and leaned against the window. The night outside was gentle. The house was silent. And I finally had an answer to give her. "I'm here, Claire. I'm still here." The day we moved, the sky was impossibly clear. Sunlight spilled through the car windows onto the fleece blanket in the back seat. Eileen clutched her stuffed bunny, nestled in her car seat, gazing out the window with a dazed kind of wonder. She was getting better at handling change, but she still needed the sound of something familiar. When the engine started, she asked, "Grandma?" I said, "I'm right here," and only then did she close her eyes and rest. The new house wasn't far from the old one. Jennifer helped me find it. A modest 2-bedroom townhouse on the edge of a small retirement community. It had a tiny backyard and it was walking distance to the library, the community center, and a playground 5 minutes away. The moment I turned the key in the lock, I realized. This was the second time in my life I'd opened a door not just for myself but for a child. The first few days were a bit of a mess, but they were real. Boxes lined the living room in neat, chaotic rows. I sat on the floor assembling Eileen's new bookshelf, while she drew little houses and Grandma's door on cardboard with a pencil. We had dinner together that night. Frozen pizza for me and for Eileen, mashed carrots and a small piece of soft-boiled chicken. She ate like it was a feast, waving her hands in the air. "Round. Like the moon?" I asked. Her eyes lit up. She grinned and repeated, "Woon." We both burst out laughing. And in that moment, it felt more like a family than any polished dinner table ever had. Eileen fell in love with our new life almost immediately. We joined story time at the library every Wednesday. She didn't recite full sentences yet, but she could name every animal. Dog, dog, bird, bird, horse, horse. She turned to me after each one just to make sure I was still there, still listening. We signed up for the weekly Grandparent and Me cooking club. One afternoon, I kneaded dough while she tossed blueberries into a bowl, though by the time we were done, half the berries were missing. Her cheeks were stained deep purple, and her grin looked like a cat who'd gotten away with something. "Eileen, did you eat them?" I asked in mock surprise. She shook her head, giggling. "No. You're tricking Grandma," I said. She let out a bubbly laugh and went right back to eating. The neighbors were kind. Joyce, the woman across the street, always brought little gifts. A few banana muffins, old puzzles, a plastic toy truck her grandson had outgrown. "I can tell you're someone who loves with her whole heart," she said once. I didn't correct her, because she was right. I had given this child everything I had. And I would keep doing it. One day I asked Eileen, "Do you remember your mom?" She nodded and whispered, "Miss Mommy." I couldn't help but pull her into a hug and kiss her forehead gently. On the couch we kept a photo of Claire, standing on the beach holding baby Eileen, her hair blowing wildly in the wind, smiling like a sunflower refusing to bow to the storm. Eileen often stared at that picture. "Mommy, smile," she'd say. And I'd nod. "She's watching you grow, sweetheart." Over these past few months, I've written dozens of letters. Not to send but to Claire. They're tucked away in a small tin box at the top of the closet. Each one filled with updates. How Eileen's grown a few inches. How she learned to pick up grapes with chopsticks. How the first time she tried to brush her teeth she swallowed half the toothpaste. I know Claire will never read them. But when I write it always feels like she's right behind me listening. I don't know if the peace we found will last. I don't know if Alan will file for a review someday. But I do know this. Claire once stood in front of every storm for this little girl. And now it's my turn. As for Alan, he eventually sold the house and moved into a more modest apartment. According to the social worker, he now lives in a rehabilitation-supported community in Arizona. He attends mandatory addiction recovery groups twice a week and has begun structured parenting classes as part of his court-mandated plan. At first he resisted. Nearly dropped out several times. But something changed after one particular visitation. Eileen had looked at him, hesitated, then clutched my hand tightly and whispered a soft, trembling, "Daddy." That moment shifted something in him. He wrote me a letter afterward. The first he'd ever sent me. It wasn't long and it didn't try to explain the past. The tone was quiet. Clear. "I'm sorry for everything. I'll do what I can to make it right. Thank you for not giving up on her. And for not destroying me." When I finished reading it, I tucked it into the wooden box Claire left behind. Not out of forgiveness. Not to remember. Just to let go. Now once a month Alan sends a postcard. He draws simple things on the back. Bears, cats, little houses meant for Eileen. She can't read all the words yet, but she always points to the pictures and laughs. He's still trying to become someone better. Eileen and we're not standing still waiting. But if the time is right someday, I believe there's room for him to return to her world. Our life now is simple. Eileen eats 3 meals a day, takes 1-hour naps, tells me about her dreams, and asks what color her mommy liked when she was little. She loves saying, "One more time," and hiding my slippers in her toy box. She doesn't know what I've done for her. She doesn't know what her mother gave up. But she is healthy. She's safe. She smiles without fear. And that's enough. She's growing. I'm aging. We're walking in different directions. But always beneath the same sunlight.